Welcome to part 1 of 2 for my videos covering the Design of RWBY Volume 6. That's right, the design video, which has always been the shortest or most brief, is now so long that I had to split it between 2 videos. Why? Well, when it comes to the design concepts of RWBY, I've never taken the time to delve into and explore the intentions, design philosophies, and methods it took to make the show. I was never fully interested to do so until now. What I've seen and learned about Volume 6 piqued my interest enough that I actually went and conducted full-on research into the design elements of RWBY to better understand and present them. By approaching these topics in a new way, I hope to bring up some interesting tidbits about the design concepts for RWBY. This video will cover the sound, environments, characters, and Grimm of Volume 6. For part 2, I will be detailing how some of the special and visual effects were achieved throughout each volume of the series as a follow-up to what I talked about in my previous animation video. So, let's get started. The sound design of RWBY Volume 6 is pretty good when it comes down to it. The cast sounds fine and the sound effects are great.
Is that...
Hey, Saf.
Then let's put it to a vote! What should we ask first? Oh! Can we ask for more questions? Can we ask for more questions?
I'm afraid you won't be able to ask it anything at the moment. The questions were used before I sealed it away.
Oh, don't tell me I missed it.
I especially like the sound cue for RWBY realizing the power of the Silver Eyes in episode 6.
Protected.
I like this so much that I used it to end off my Toonami music video titled Don't Have Time to Die. Which is the best Toonami video I've made so far, so please check it out. Shameless plug. What I find interesting in the sound design this time around is how it conveys intent and establishes the atmosphere of a given setting. Where sound design plays a role in conveying the intent of a scene is in the fights with Adam against Blake and then Yang. The goal of the crew was to emphasize the intensity of these scenes through choreography, storyboarding, and sound design.
I wanted to get as much intensity into this scene and energy and drama as possible. There's a lot of intense sound effects, intense music. As I'm boarding and I'm thinking about all that.
The choreography is fast and varied. The camera work for the first 2 fights with Blake are up close, mirroring the pressure Blake feels. She constantly tries to get away from Adam, but can't, meaning the framing is also enclosing on Blake to highlight this whenever Adam gets close. The sound effects for each of Adam's actions are unique in how aggressive they are. It's as if he's putting all of his anger and rage into each swing. Getting the atmosphere of the Brunswick farm through sound was pivotal for episodes 5 and 6. The farm comes with an air of unease due to how quiet it is. The creaking of wood, the wind from the snowstorm outside, and the wonderful score by Jeff Williams and Alex Abraham. It all contributes to this eerie stillness that makes one anxious of their surroundings, making that tension tighten more and more as the characters explore the farm. There are a few things I do hear issues in. First up is how the characters sound while on top of the train in episode 1. In 2 instances, there's a character who is speaking in the background of a shot, but they sound as though they are right next to the camera.
Why is it always something? Just keep them toward the back!
Hey, what are you doing?
Compare these to the train scene at the end of Volume 2 where Oblek yells back to the students about the individual cars.
They all have fun!
There is a clear audio effect being used to emphasize the distance of Oblek from the main cast and how he needs to speak loudly in order to be heard. The problem should now be clear, as this type of audio effect isn't being applied to RWBY and Crow's lines when it should be. When it comes to some of the efforts, I just didn't like what I heard from Blake and Yang during their final fight with Adam. They sound reused and at times unnecessary.
Fucking my god, baby, come back and load the ball, Nelly. Yeah, oh my god, baby, you alright?
I apologize for nothing. Nothing! Let's move on to the environmental and set design of this volume. The environments of Volume 6 look amazing. From Episode 1 to Episode 13, there is not a single bad-looking environment or set. Each set is well utilized and doesn't overstay its welcome. We even see the use of matte paintings for background visuals that look good and don't break one's immersion. A little side here, this is not a problem, as 2D background art is nothing new to RWBY and has been done since the color trailers. The design for the train and the mountain in Episode 1 are noteworthy because they are made as a set within a set. What I mean by this is that you have the main set, which is the mountainside set, train tracks, and the surrounding forest, but then you also have the train, which has its own interior set, being placed on the tracks of the mountain set. This made it so they can move the camera from the outside of the train to the inside of the train, and vice versa, really easy. One thing that is interesting, to me at least, is how they designed the mountainside as a donut set.
So, we started out with this just basically giant straight length of train and set, and as we're experimenting with it, we also decided, well, that also means that at certain angles, it kind of, you see it go off into nothing.
Yeah.
And then we thought, well, what if it was just a giant donut?
Right.
I think it's hella clever. I'm so glad that we did it this way because of all the stuff that we have to do with 3D space. We do not have the 3D tools.
No.
In After Effects that everyone else does.
This means that the environment is just a giant circle that is segmented into different sections of the train tracks. They hide this by having it snow and fog out the background of each shot. What surprises me is how you can't tell that this is the case because there isn't a noticeable curve going along the tracks. We do see another donut set in Episode 7 as the group rides to Argus through the forest. This one does have that noticeable curve. I did wonder if they have the characters and objects move through the environment, or have the environment rotate while everything else stays in their respective positions. I found out that it is the latter, which is obvious upon retrospect and is something they've done before. I find it commendable that even though we get to see the Mistral House one more time, that the crewbie tried to give it a different feel by having a new scene director, Connor Pickens, handle that portion of the episode, which is the first time I've heard of them doing this. The idea was to have a new voice, so to speak, present this room in a new way to the viewer. Whether or not it worked is up to the individual. Episode 3 is where the design for the sets and environments shine. Every location looks like it comes from another world, which is good because they are showing us what the previous humanity's world looked like. This is like taking the chamber for the Relic of Knowledge to a new level. This episode also sees extensive use of matte paintings for background elements, one-off sets, and more. The use of these is actually pretty well done. Even the use of these paintings and 2D character stills when the God of Darkness eradicates all of humanity is okay, because it makes it seem like this is all happening in that one instance of time. We finally get a look at one of the lower levels of Mistral through Cinder's plotline. This shows some of the other Eastern influences in Mistral's design. I was going to say that the cinematography also borrows from Eastern cinema through these walking and overhead shots of umbrellas, but I couldn't find anything to confirm it. I listened to the commentary, found out who storyboarded the scene, looked at their storyboards, checked to see if there was any information about the storyboards, and finally researched information regarding overhead shots of umbrellas in film. Eastern cinematography wasn't mentioned much, if at all. One film that's a musical that I would see mentioned often during my research is, and I'm going to butcher this, Les Parapluies de Cherbourg, which is translated to The Umbrellas of Cherbourg. A French film originally released in 1964 and has opening credits that is an overhead shot of umbrellas, like episode 2 of Volume 6, but definitely doesn't have the same styling and intentions I'm looking for. So, why did I think this type of shot is of Eastern influence? Well, the most recent examples I can think of that emulate something close to this are the E3 trailer for Ghostwire Tokyo and the second opening to Fruits Basket 2019. If you know anything about the filmography of this type of shot, please let me know as I'm pretty interested in it. I'm gonna skip talking about the Brunswick farm, as I think the way it sounds is more important than the way it looks, which I still nailed by the way. So let's finish this section off by talking about Argus City. When it came to developing the architecture of the city, they mainly based it on San Francisco, seen with the tram that goes down an incline all the way through the city. They also took influence from Greek architecture, since this would be both Pyrrha and Neptune's home. This was revealed for Neptune in the Before the Dawn book, released on January 9th, 2020. I think I mentioned this in my story video for Volume 6, but I just like how much better they established Argus as an actual setting compared to Mistral. They made sure to have multiple landmarks established and visited that are both important to the city and the characters. Let's switch gears and talk about character design. There isn't much for me to talk about for the main cast, other than Weiss getting leggings and a scarf, and Blake losing that heavy jacket I don't like. I do like the new designs for Cinder and Neo. I also find Neo's original outfit's transition to the new look to be well done. Although, I think her new design is slightly weaker to the original. Along the same line, I think Adam's new design is weaker compared to his original just due to how dim the colors are in comparison. The deep black of the original helps make the red accents of the outfit pop. The slightly grayed black just doesn't elicit the same contrast with the red, but this does make the use of Adam's semblance stand out more as it brings back those dark blacks and bright reds. I want to note that it's weird to give Adam a hood and then drop it for a band that covers his eyes. I did really like the character designs for all the new characters introduced in Volume 6. Each of them are appealing and unique, just really nice all around. The gods of light and darkness are noteworthy as they are RWBY's take on deities and gods. They both have the same capabilities but choose to dedicate their talents to different forms of creation. The god of light creates life in such a way to help them thrive, while the god of darkness creates beings that attempt to exterminate that life. Where their differences continue is in their physique and posture. The god of light stands taller and is more muscular than the god of darkness. The god of light's initial posture when greeting Salem is upright and approachable. The god of darkness, however, is intimidating, violent, and slouched. Their standing poses are also different in that the god of light clasps his hands together in front of him. In contrast, the god of darkness puts his arms behind his back. One thing I don't like or just have a negative response to, that might really just be me, is the design of Oz and Salem's children. I don't know exactly what it is about their designs that just causes me to be like, ugh. After thinking about it, it might be the proportions of the head, body, arms, and legs, but I can't say for sure. The thing is, this isn't isolated to just them. I've had this reaction to half of the child characters we've seen since Volume 3. The ones that I didn't have this reaction to are kids Ren and Nora, some of the other kids in the flashback to Ren's home, and Adrian. I do want to give praise to some of the female designs this time around. One criticism that can be given to RWBY when it comes to its female designs is a lack of variance. Almost all of them have the hourglass shape, with the most divergent being Raven and Kali's crow's feet to show age. There might be subtle differences I'm not picking up on, but you can see why people would make this observation. That's why I really like the designs of Little Miss, Maria, and Cordovan. I don't know any way to say this without sounding a little bit offensive, but Little Miss is the pudgiest character next to Port, and they really made it work. There was an attempt at something like this in Volume 5 with the Weapons Woman, but the face of the character is clearly from a default female model, which is why Little Miss' face works so well as it matches the rest of her body. Maria and Cordovan's designs are awesome due to their posture and how this relates to their characters. Maria was a huntress who gave up and went into hiding after losing her eyes, which explains why she is slouched and has to walk with a cane. She hasn't really been maintaining herself. Cordovan, on the other hand, has remained a part of the Atlas military and has clearly kept herself fit and healthy, thus she has an upright demeanor. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Jin. Designed by Aaron Wynn and guided by art director Patrick Rodriguez, Jin was based on the statue representing her that was seen at the end of Volume 5 in the main hall of Haven Academy. Her jewelry and other accessories also came from the ornamentation seen on the Relic of Knowledge that contains her. She was given smoke as a way to emphasize her magical origins and ethereal nature, going so far as to have her hair and body have this wisp and float to them. I actually took the time to research Jin to learn more about why she emanates smoke and is given the color blue for her skin. I knew that this may have been popularized by the genie in the Disney film Aladdin, but I wanted to see if I can learn more about it. It turns out that making the genie blue was a creative choice for the Aladdin team to help align Genie with the main cast and act as a contrast to Jafar, who is given red and black colors. This is why Jafar is red when he is turned into a genie during the final act of the film. Smoke seems to be important to beings known as jinn as a concept, their mythology mentioning that they are created by smokeless fire, and is sometimes referred to as subtle fire because the fire in which they were born didn't create a lot of smoke. This might suggest that most of the smoke from that fire was used to help give the jinn their form. This would make sense, as most jinn are formless, much like smoke and other gases unless given a container. That said, giving the character Jinn the color blue actually makes a lot of sense. In color theory, blue is usually associated with wisdom. Jinn being a keeper and giver of knowledge thus would need blue in her design in some shape or form. Now, Jinn is also given the color of gold through her jewelry and other accessories. Looking again at color theory, gold is sometimes associated with magic or status. Since Jinn is a being appointed to the task of guiding humanity with knowledge by the god of light, this gives Jinn an important position in magical origin. Why Jinn is mostly naked isn't easily explained, but she is given a dress through the smoke below her waist. I would say that they should have expanded the smoke to the upper parts of her body for obvious reasons. I can't think of a way to end this section, so here's something stupid I edited together in relation to Jinn.
No nether regions at all. It's even better than pure nudity. Obviously suitable for all ages. Very healthy and natural. Moderately sexy, but not like super dirty or anything. Hey, you know what we should call this? The Super Healthy Unnude Beach Deluxe!
Tell me, what knowledge do you seek?
Now, let's get into the Grimm of this volume. Volume 6 introduced 4 new Grimm into the world of RWBY, 3 of which have clear inspirations, while the last one's inspiration, conception, creation, and implementation has a very interesting journey. The Manticore was planned to be introduced for Volume 6 during the scripting phase of the volume due to a need to introduce new Grimm to the series. But they hit a hiccup when a fan artist put out their own concept for a Manticore on Reddit, which was found by Carrie. This put the crewbie in a tight spot in which they had to worry about potential accusations of plagiarism. They decided to bring on the artist, Reddit user Inkyo24, Oromi Kim, as an actual concept artist for RWBY. Oromi would go to touch up her concept of the Manticore and design the Sphinx, among other things for RWBY, which we'll get to. The original design of the Manticore was a lot larger than the final concept, which is quite faithful to the original. The only changes made were its size, the color of the stinger, and the addition of wings. I feel the color change of the stinger from red to white to be a downgrade, but there might be rules of design put in place during RWBY's conception that would force the body and extremities of the Grimm to be black and white, while the eyes and inside of the Grimm are yellow and red, although the Deathstalker would say otherwise. The Leviathan is clearly designed after kaiju from Japanese media, the most popular of which being Godzilla. To my surprise, the Leviathan was also designed by Oromi Kim. The design of the Leviathan doesn't fully match its inspiration, the creature being more amphibian than reptilian unlike Godzilla. This makes the Grimm being a sea creature more understandable, as it has webbing and other physical features that would be good for moving through water. I actually like the design of this Grimm quite a lot. The story of how the Apathy came to be for Volume 6 is a long one. Originally thought of by RWBY writer and voice actor Miles Luna, the Apathy has been a part of RWBY since before Volume 1. Thinking of and discussing the many different types of Grimm and the threats they could pose alongside Monty and Carrie, Miles wanted a Grimm that wasn't physically terrifying, but something frail. It was what it could do that would make it scary. Miles would then find a picture of a scarecrow that was posted to Reddit. This image would be the starting point of the Apathy. I was captivated. It couldn't move. It couldn't do anything really, but I was so disturbed by it. Miles would then begin taking inspiration from the stories and films he read and watched that left an impact on him over the years. The major influences for how the Apathy worked would come from the film Serenity, directed and written by Joss Whedon and released in 2005, and the short story of Bartleby the Scrivener by Herman Melville that was originally released in 1853. The film Serenity would act as the main influence for what the Apathy could do. In Serenity, there was a planet in which the government released an experimental gas on its people in an attempt to pacify them. These chemicals would work so well that the people affected would lay on the ground and die due to inactivity. The story of Bartleby would come to give the Apathy their name, as well as the name of the farmer who established the Brunswick farm. The short story has Bartleby be a new hire for a lawyer in Wall Street and actually perform well at his job. One day, the lawyer requested that Bartleby examine a small document, but Bartleby responded with,
"I would prefer not to."
This would escalate to more aspects of Bartleby's life as he would do less and less to the point where he wouldn't even eat. Bartleby's passive nature would eventually have him jailed and ultimately die of starvation, similar to how the people died in Serenity as described earlier. The phrase spoken by Bartleby, "I would prefer not to anything asked of him," is what stuck with Miles the most. In this tale was an idea of a man who became so apathetic to everything and everyone around him that he was fired, evicted, imprisoned, and eventually starved. Because when it came to doing anything, he would prefer not to. That line haunted me. I would prefer not to. The apathy is a Grimm that causes those around him to feel more and more fatigued, as though a steadily growing weight was being placed on the victim. This would affect their minds and cause the victim to feel more apathetic to their surroundings and well-being. Until finally, the victim would stop moving altogether as the apathy continuously encroached upon them. The victim constantly trying to run, only to have their spirit sapped away from them. The apathy would come to have an additional ability to send out a large amount of this spirit-sapping atmosphere, referred to as a thrall, by laying out a loud scream. This idea would come from RWBY writer, voice actor, and director Kerry Shawcross, who took inspiration from the Legend of Zelda enemy called the Re-Dead. This enemy from the games would move towards its victims slowly and be able to paralyze them with its gaze while letting out a horrific screech, which is very similar to how the thrall from the apathy works. The apathy would come to be Miles' favorite Grimm, but due to the nature and power of the apathy, it was deemed too powerful to introduce during the early introductory days of RWBY. The crew originally planned to have the apathy and the story of the Brunswick farm be a part of RWBY Volume 4. The idea during these travel days was to bring in more episodic stories while progressing each of the characters to their destinations, but due to the complexity of jumping between multiple different storylines that happened in different parts of Remnant, this idea and the apathy had to be cut, or pushed rather. Volume 6 ended up being the opportunity they needed to bring in the apathy, as Miles put it.
The storyline for the apathy is one that I've had since before Volume 1, and then Volume 6 came around. We had, this enormous revelation about Oz and Salem, and when our characters are confronted with that, they're not in the greatest headspace. Very early on, characters keep referring to how tired they are, and they start saying things that might seem a little out of character, suddenly talking about giving up or just going home or what's the point.
Our hero's natural low points in the volume helped to mask what would have otherwise been out of character behaviors and statements. The biggest hint I kept dropping was the line, "I'm tired." This line would be inspired from the similar line spoken by Bartleby in response to anything asked of him. I would prefer not to. When it came time to create the design of the apathy, the task would first go to veteran RWBY concept artist Patrick Rodriguez. His original concept would eventually be passed over as it appeared to be more fast and ferocious than originally intended. The design looked like a mangled person, who was just skin and bones, that had a long tongue sticking out of its mouth, and whose limbs were mutated into sharp bones. During the design process, Patrick would actually become scared and depressed, and would need to step away from time to time because of this. This design reminds me of the Necromorphs from the Dead Space franchise, specifically the slashers. The design of the apathy would actually be given to newcomer Hiromi Kim, who has now created the concept and designs for all the new Grimm introduced in Volume 6. Hiromi's concept would refer back to the original image of the Scarecrow that inspired Miles, while taking main inspiration from the artwork found in a collection of stories known as Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. The apathy now looking like decaying, slow-moving corpses, better fitting the original concept of a frail Grimm that Miles envisioned. The design and implementation of the apathy for Volume 6 is incredible. Giving these Grimm the look of rotting corpses helps elicit a feeling of unease and dread. Having the Grimm be slow and given the abilities they have also symbolizes the slow encroachment of death that can be prolonged but is inescapable. Well done to Miles, Hiromi, and the rest of the team.
I'm always blown away by what the RWBY team is able to put together. They are some of the hardest working people that I've ever had the pleasure of working with. This whole volume has been wild, and it's so exciting to finally see this part of the story get told.
That covers most of the design concepts and categories of Volume 6. I think this volume to be best on a design and visual level overall. There was only a few things I could take issue with. Please look forward to the next part that covers the special and visual effects of not just RWBY Volume 6, but all of RWBY up to that volume. As per usual, here are some questions I would like to read your thoughts on. What do you think of RWBY's character design evolution up to Volume 6? Has it improved, or are there areas they should address? Are there any environments that caught your attention or think needed something more? How do you find the city of Argus as a setting in the world of Revenant? How do you feel about the Apathy and how they came to be a part of RWBY? Please leave a comment below and let me know.